Good to see everyone who has returned this evening to join with us, worship God, and to lift our voices in praise to His great and matchless name. It's just really good to see all of you out this evening. Solomon, we're told, was the wisest of all men of his age, perhaps the wisest man who has ever lived. He demonstrated some wisdom as a young man when God told him that he could ask anything that he wanted and it would be granted to him. And Solomon, already demonstrating some wisdom, asked God to give him more wisdom so that he would know how to go about guiding and directing and ruling over God's people. And so God not only blessed him with great riches, but he also blessed him with wisdom as well. The book of Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon. It was a book that Solomon wrote probably in the latter part of his life, because in that book he writes about his experiences in life. He writes about how that he went about doing all various kinds of experiments, really, to a certain extent, in regard to finding the meaning of life and to realize just exactly what life here upon this earth was really all about. And it's kind of interesting to note that Solomon, as he writes this book of Ecclesiastes, he writes about life under the sun. He uses the word vanity 33 different times. He uses life under the sun 29 times. And as he wrote this book, he really was writing about his personal experiences and how that he sought for the meaning of life. What life is really all about and what is the purpose of life. Why are we here? Where are we going? And all the things in between, so to speak. And as we read just now with Brother Mario, the last words of the text that Solomon wrote was vanity of vanities. In other words, there is an element of life here upon this earth that is nothing but vanity. But as Solomon would conclude his book, he tells us how to avoid a life that is nothing but vanity, a life that has very little, if any, meaning to it, a life that is lived without any real value to it. And he concluded by saying, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole of man. This is what we're all about. This is what God created us. Why God created us. He wanted to have fellowship with us. But in order for us to have fellowship with God, as Solomon was guided by the Holy Spirit, we must fear God, respect him, understand, recognize that he is God, and that we must do his will in order to have a relationship with him, to have fellowship with him. And then as we go through that book, Solomon issues warnings to everybody. To youth, he says, listen, enjoy your youth, as we're going to look at in just a moment. Just recognize that it's fleeting. And old age, he kind of lets us know, is not for the weak of heart. And I got to tell you, I don't consider myself to be an old person at all. I'm very young at heart. I consider myself to a certain extent to be still a kid, if you will. But I can tell you that I can already see that as age continues and as your body deteriorates, that it's really not for the weak of heart. I have for a good while now had a greater appreciation for our elderly people, our elderly members especially, those who come out on a regular basis to worship God, knowing how difficult it is for them to even just get here. If you notice Sister Diana Bragg today, she is just barely able to walk. She has to walk with a cane, with something to assist her. And even at that, she can just barely put one foot in front of the other. And part of that, of course, is because of having difficulty recovering from the surgery that she had, but also a lot of that has to simply do with the fact that she is getting on up in years. Dorothy Sheline, our sister Dorothy, who wants to be here so desperately. I talk with her almost every day. And every day I'm reminded by her how much she wants to be here. And how it's really starting to get to her that she can't come to the assembly like she wants to, but Sister Sheline can just barely get around herself. And there are others. Our sister Carol Greer misses some because of her various infirmities that prevent her from being able to get out. And one of the things that we need to recognize, especially recognize when we're younger, and that is that if God blesses us with length of days, we'll all get there. We'll all get there, and we'll amplify on that as we go along. This evening, I just want us to look at life for just a moment. I want us to look at life from Solomon's perspective, what he had to say, recognizing that he was guided by God's Holy Spirit. The things that he wrote were inspired, but they were inspired words describing this life that he had lived and what he had learned along the way. And we want to begin with talking about what Solomon found in regard to being young, about being youthful. He says, "Rejoice, young man, during your childhood, and let your heart be pleasant during the days of your young manhood, and follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes." That all sounds really intriguing, doesn't it? But then Solomon gives us a little bit of how to temper that, and he says, "Yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things." Now, young people are an interesting study. I used to be one myself. And it wasn't that long ago that I can't remember all about it. You know, one of the things that I do remember about being young, and that is being in a real big hurry to be older. I was in a real big hurry to become an adult. And I remember, and I think that it is probably true of a lot of young people as they are getting older and as they are trying their very best to be older than what their chronological years actually are, that the thought behind them is an idea of independence. I want to be independent. I want to be able to make up my mind for myself. I want to follow the desires of my heart, like Solomon is writing about here. I'd really like to get to the point to where I can eat as many cookies as I want to and nobody has a right to say anything to me. That's just part of youth. Wanting to grow up, wanting to be an adult, wanting to be out on their own, wanting to be independent. But here's the thing. Nobody really is independent. Because as Solomon says, there's that thing called judgment. There's that thing called accountability before God. And even though as you are an adult, you can make decisions for yourself. You can eat as many cookies as you want to, unless you're like me and I've got all the people of this congregation telling me what I can and can't eat anymore because I'm diabetic and I'm trying to lose weight. I appreciate it. I really do. I know that I joke with you a whole lot about that, but I really do appreciate your kindness and your concern for my well-being. But it's just a point of matter, and that is that we never, ever really get to a point to where we can just do anything we want to. But I'll tell you something about youth that is very important. And that is, it's in your youth when you have all the energy in the world. You just can go for hours and just keep on going. Have you noticed after services are over, have you noticed our young people? Those kids have all the energy in the world. They don't get tired. They're happy. They're carefree. They don't have a care in this world. You know, they haven't got to that part of life where they have the responsibilities of adulthood. It's a wonderful thing about being young. Don't be, young people, don't be in such a hurry to become an adult, because once you become an adult, you have responsibilities. You have responsibilities that will not allow you to get a good night's sleep sometimes. You have responsibilities that are so pressing on you that you can even get ulcers or it can affect your health. Don't get in such a hurry. Enjoy your youth. That's what Solomon said. What Solomon says here, enjoy being a young person. Just don't make a mess out of your life while you're doing it. Recognize that you are accountable before God, the life that you are living. But to me, I think the biggest danger that there is to youth is the fact that young people very rarely, if ever, think about eternity. That young people have a tendency to live their lives totally unthinking about that prospect that I'm not going to be alive. I think that that's one of the things that young people have as a part of their nature. It's just part of being young. That you're so busy enjoying life, you're so busy living life, you're so full of vigor and vim and excitement, and life is such an adventure and that sort of thing. Yeah, there's obstacles for kids too, but you have a tendency to be able to put those behind you pretty easy. Forget about them. But the thing about that is that you're full of life. And you just seem like that your whole life is ahead of you. Be sure that you don't forget the fact that life is very uncertain. Dale pointed it out in his Bible class this morning from the book of James, how that we really, in all of our activities, should say to ourselves, if the Lord wills, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. We can have all kinds of plans. We can make all kinds of plans. We can look so forward to tomorrow or the next day or next year or whatever it might be. But the fact of the matter, we have no control whatsoever about tomorrow. We have no control whatsoever about what the future, if there is a future for us, might hold for us. What's going to take place in our lives. I noticed on the internet this last week that there was a 12-year-old girl that was abducted. And they found her body. Somebody had taken her life. I suspect that that young girl at some point thought that she just had her whole life ahead of her, because that's the way life is, especially with young people. We think that, okay, I feel so good now. I just don't think that as young people we can even begin to think about not living. But that can be a very, very great danger. It's just so interesting to watch young people, because they are so full of life and they have so full of energy. I got really amused this past Wednesday evening. Some of us gathered over at Wendy's after Wednesday night services, and I sat down with Brenda and Peggy and Angela, and Ryan came to sit down at our table. And then finally, Audrey came to sit down at our table. And of course, because of my diet and everything, I have to be very, very careful what I eat. But I had purposely limited the calories that I had taken in Wednesday so I could go, whether it was at Burger King or over at Wendy's, so I could have something to eat with everybody else. And I was enjoying my little cup of chili, because first of all, it doesn't have that many calories in it, and so it fit into my diet just perfectly well. But then here comes, here comes along Ryan, and he sits down right to my left-hand side, and he unwraps this big Dave's triple burger that had to be at least that thick. It had 3 patties of meat in it, and it had a slice of cheese between each one of the patties of meat. And he had this huge thing of French fries that just looked so good. And they smelled good, too. And he had the temerity to sit down right beside me and eat that thing. But you know what? That's part of being a youth. Because, you see, we all know Ryan. He's like 6'1", maybe 6 feet, 6'1". He's tall. That kid is tall. I tell you, the kid's on steroids. He can't possibly be that tall, so young and alive. But Ryan is tall and he's thin. And that's one of the things about youth. You can eat that kind of stuff and it doesn't bother you. You can stay slim and all that kind of stuff. You get to a certain age, though, and you eat a Dave's triple burger, and the whole thing settles right in your middle and it stays there. I can tell you that right now. It's just not all that pleasant a thing. But James would tell us, you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You're just a vapor. Solomon said that in the text that we read this evening about the fleeting days of youth. Our lives are just a vapor that appears for a little while, he says, and then vanishes away. I think that I've probably alluded to this before, but my mother on her 90th birthday, we had a little party for her, and we asked her to say a few things to us, and the only thing that she wanted to say about being 90 years old, she says, I can't believe it got here so quick. 90 years. Now, for you youngsters, I know that just 90, holy cow, that's getting on up there. And it is. And yet my mother said it got here really, really quickly. Faster than I could ever imagine. And that's the thing about life. It is so brief. Regardless of how many years God blesses you with, it is so very quick. And so Solomon tells us, for the youth, he says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, when you will say, I have no delight in them. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy your youth. Enjoy your good health and your vitality and your energy and your ability to go and do things. Stay up till the wee hours of the morning and get up the next day and go to school or whatever the case may be. And it just seems like that you're like the ever-ready bunny. You just can keep on going. And that's good. But just remember, young folks, that your life, even then, is being watched by God. And Solomon, this wisest of all men, says, remember your Creator when you're a young person, and just remember that you will have to give an account concerning the things that you do. I have heard from people that were in their latter years of life, and one of the things that really, to me, is one of the saddest things, is to hear older people talk about all the regrets that they have because it seems to them like their life was wasted. It seems to them that those days when they were young and they had all this energy just went by so fast, and they didn't accomplish a lot of the things that they wanted to accomplish. And even at that, what they did accomplish didn't seem to have a whole lot of meaning to them now. And now that they're in their latter years, their life is so unfulfilled and such that they really, all they can talk about are their regrets. One of the ways to avoid that is to live a good life as a young person, a good life remembering God and remembering God's will for you. But let's turn to the old people. And no, this is not a self-portrait. This is not a selfie. So don't be sitting down there thinking, wow, Bill's looking pretty good there. But there are things about old age and growing older that are not all that hot, tell you the truth. They're not all that pleasant. Solomon described it in the text for our lesson this evening. He said the grinders, that's a reference to our teeth. And he says, they're not working all as good as they used to because there's not as many of them as there used to be. They're few, Solomon said. You get older, and sometimes the next thing you know, you don't really have a whole lot of teeth in your head because for one reason or another, they've had to be pulled out because they have gotten bad or whatever the case may be. Solomon says part of growing older sometimes is a matter that you lose your teeth. And he talks about how that our eyes become dim, that we don't see as good as we used to see. And he talks about our ears, how that our ears don't hear as well as we once heard. I said something to Mario about that out in the foyer. And Mario, being the funny fellow that he is, he said, what'd you say? That's kind of what it is. We can hear to a certain extent, and yet there's a lot of things that we don't hear because the ears just don't work as good as they used to. But you know what? What that usually means is that God has blessed you with many days of life. And Solomon talked about how that we don't get to sleep as soundly as we once did. That's a part of growing older too. And he talks about how that there are things that scare you now that you used to just kind of laugh at. Things that you actually used to enjoy, things that used to be kind of thrilling to you, and they're very frightening to you as you get older because you recognize that those things are really dangerous. And that's another thing about youth. You young people don't seem to understand about danger as they need to. Solomon calls them the evil days, not evil in the sense of there being bad, evil, sinful things, evil in the sense that the thing about growing older is this, that one of the greatest shocks there are in this whole world is getting to a point in life where all of a sudden you realize, I can't do the things I used to do. And even the things that I used to do that I can still do, I don't do as well. And I can't do them as efficiently as I used to. And not only that, but the things that I used to do that were actually pleasant and enjoyable to me, now, as I'm getting older and my body is starting to get more and more feeble and frail, they hurt to do that. It used to be that I was almost a scratch golfer. Now, for you who don't know much about golf, that means that I used to be able to shoot par, the number of strokes that you're supposed to have on each hole. And it used to be that I could shoot par and I could actually shoot under par fairly regularly. And it was a great, great joy to me. But now those days are gone. Now those days are nothing more than just a distant memory to me. And not only that, but they're not even really that much of a pleasant memory to me anymore because they're so far removed. They're so far gone. And I know that those are things in my life that are no longer available to me. I was out cleaning out my garage, I think last summer, not this past summer, but the one before. And there were my golf clubs. And I went and I looked at them, and they were all just rusted up. I hadn't used them in several years, and they were just all rusted up. And I looked at those golf clubs, and I said, you know what, Bill? You're not able to play golf anymore anyway. And so I just put them out for the trash people to pick up, and they did. Because those days are gone. Those days are gone. And they afforded me great pleasure at one time, but those days are not available to me anymore. And sometimes if we think about that too much, it'll cause us to maybe get kind of discouraged and maybe even bitter because life has changed so much for us. And we recognize that since we can't do those things, what does life hold for me that is all that good? Well, you know what? One of the good things about these evil days, when our eyes are dim and we can't hear so good and all that sort of thing, but with age usually comes some wisdom that we don't have when we're young. Wisdom that is so very important to us. And this same man, Solomon, wrote another book that he is credited for at least writing the vast majority of it, and that's the book of Proverbs. And when you read the book of Proverbs, what you find is that it's all about wisdom, receiving instruction and having wisdom and gaining wisdom. We're told in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verses 1 through 3, therefore I exhort the elders among you as your fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Christ and a partaker also of the glory that is to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but voluntarily, according to the will of God, and not for sordid gain, but with eagerness, nor yet as lording it over those allotted to your charge, but proving to be examples to the flock. You know, God gave us instructions, and he gave us qualifications for men to serve in the local congregation as an elder, as an overseer, as a bishop, as a shepherd. All of those names are given in the New Testament, referring to the same office in the New Testament church, and that is of the eldership. And God says, I want mature men. I don't want young men who are still perhaps giving in to some of the vanity of youth, but for those who are to shepherd thy flock, I want older men, experienced men, and he gives qualifications for those men. And this coming year is the year that we're going to focus entirely, the year we want to focus on the eldership. So many people have commented to me, I sure wish we had elders. Well, I do too. And what we need to do this year is we need to focus on that. The men, I want to say it once again, the men that you think could be good shepherds of the Hammond church, you need to go to them. You need to let them know, I think that you would be a good elder, somebody that we could follow, somebody that we could trust, someone that we could put our soul in your keeping and have confidence that you will take care of my soul, that you will help me get to heaven. You need to go and you need to talk to these men and you need to tell them that you have that kind of confidence in them if you do. That you would encourage them to seek the eldership. You need to go and you need to let them know that perhaps there are some things that they need to work on. Something that maybe you've noticed that you wonder if maybe it would be good if they worked on that and got stronger concerning those things. But we need to go to the men of this congregation, folks, and we need to let them know, I think you would make a good shepherd of the flock, and encourage them. And those are the men that God has designated, men of experience, men that have some experience with life, men who have shown themselves to be a good leader of their household. Their children are believers. Their children are those who follow after their teachings and their oversight. One of the things that is so wonderful about being a man and getting older is the exalted privilege of serving God in the local congregation as a shepherd of the flock. And that's something that God wants the older men to be involved with. But not only that, he also tells us about the ladies too. Older women likewise are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good, so that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands. I find this very interesting, that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands. Aren't they supposed to do that anyway? Aren't they supposed to know what that's all about? But you know, sometimes the youth kind of prevents the younger women to understand that, you know what, this business of submissiveness, that takes a lot of wisdom sometimes. The idea of being submissive and the idea of submitting to their husband as their head, and young women to love their husbands, to love their children. That's supposed to be a natural thing, isn't it? And yet the older women are supposed to help the younger women understand what that's all about. And it says to be sensible, pure, workers at home, kind, being subject to their own husbands, so that the word of God will not be dishonored. But notice that he starts out older women. There's just some very great blessings and some wonderful responsibilities that we have as we grow older. That God looks to us to be teachers and guiders of those younger people, to help them to grow up so that in future generations they can then be the leaders. They can be the ones to help the church grow and the young people to know God and to follow after him. We need to be like the Apostle Paul. Brethren, I do not regard myself as having laid hold of it yet, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead, he says, I press toward the high calling of the Lord Jesus Christ. The point that I want to make there is simply this, that we never get to retire being a child of God. We never get to hang up our golf clubs. We never get to hang up our gloves, so to speak. But that being a Christian and being a disciple of Christ and being a servant of God is a lifetime journey. One that we should embrace and one that we should look forward to. And Brenda, I intended to ask your permission, but I'm sure that you won't mind anyway. Several years ago, I was visiting with Sister Easter. And Easter was in her 90s. I think at that time she's probably around 93, 94, something like that. And I looked at, I was watching Easter and I saw how happy she was to be in the assembly and everything. And I thought about, wow, she's 94 or something like that. I have no idea how many more days upon this earth she might have. And I had a good enough relationship with Easter. As a matter of fact, in the latter part, she and I had a wonderful relationship. And so I felt comfortable going to her and asking her this question. Is it scary? Is it scary for you to know that there might not be a whole lot of days left ahead of you? And I loved what she had to say. No, it's exciting. It's exciting as long as you walk with God. And I thought about that, and I've thought about that many times ever since I talked with Sister Easter about that. And I thought about, you know what? It is an exciting thing. It's perhaps, or at least should be, the most exciting thing that we ever consider in this life. And that is the fact that perhaps within our lifetime, maybe the Lord will come, but if not, that even growing older, our bodies wearing out, and our spirits depart, and we leave this earth. But when we do, we get to go home. The Apostle Paul wrote, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. In the future there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. I made the comment one time to Brother Rick Ligon that I couldn't think of one thing that was good about growing old. And he says, I can, brother. We're just that much closer to home. I've never made that statement ever since then. Because growing older, if God permits, we're just that much closer to going home. That should be so exciting to each and every one of us. That should be our goal. That should be what we anticipate and look for with extreme joy and lust for it. And that is, I get to go home. I get to go be with my God. I get to go bask in the glory of my Savior and share in his glory. If that's not what you're looking forward to, do you look forward and love the appearing of Jesus Christ? Or do you sometimes during the course of the day, because you know that there are things in your life that are amiss, and you wonder and you even worry, and it's a scary thought, what if Jesus came right now and I'm not prepared? But a life well lived, as Sister Easter lived, we can anticipate the Lord's return, or even if our life should end, we get to go home. If that's not your hope this evening, can we make that your hope through your obedience to Jesus Christ? All together we stand and sing this song.